All right, guys, so joining us now to discuss this further is friend of the show, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Welcome back, Jamil. Thanks for being on. Now, of course, Mexico, it's a huge, diverse country in many ways, kind of like the United States is. So to say that it's dangerous to go to Mexico as a whole, I don't think that helps anything, adds anything to the conversation. But what makes border cities like Tijuana, Juarez, and Matamoros in this situation so dangerous compared to other parts?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we have here, Nick, is that what we're seeing taking place in these border towns is an increase in crime of all varieties, but in particular kidnapping and murder. It's largely a product of the cartel wars that we've seen going on in Mexico amongst the cartels and with the Mexican government. Part of the reason these cartel wars are happening in border towns in particular is because of the transit of drugs to the United States and the lucrative prospect of drugs being sold into the United States. And so that's part of what's causing these border towns to be particularly a part of it. You also see, though, on that map that we were just looking at, that some of the most violent areas, or some of the areas that the U.S. government is saying don't travel to, are also within the interior of Mexico, sometimes where these cartels are strong, at other times where the drugs are being grown. That oftentimes becomes the nexus for where this violence takes place.
Yeah, okay, so it ultimately does come back to violence, cartels. Unfortunately, Mexico not a stranger to those kinds of things. It's not uncommon to, unfortunately, see what we just did. But we heard from the Mexican president on this. He doesn't always speak directly to this. Does that speak to the seriousness of a situation like this in Mexico involving American citizens particularly? Jamil, what are some of the diplomatic repercussions of an incident like this one?
Well, look, I think obviously President López Obrador is recognizing that, when a handful of Americans come across the border into Mexico and they're immediately and whisked away, and there's videos of it and pictures all over the internet, this doesn't cast a good image for Mexico writ large, but it also is going to create problems in the United States. We're going to say, look, you can't even protect our citizens within miles of the border. How can we allow any Americans to travel there? As you point out, there are 6 states already on the do not travel to for Americans at all list. There's another 7 on the reconsider travel and 17 on the take extra precautions. So, this is a significant portion of Mexico, which obviously, as you point out, it doesn't make sense to say all of Mexico, but it's a concerning thing. It's got to be concerning for the president himself there in Mexico.
Of course, no less because, tourism, a huge cash cow for the country. They don't want that kind of reputation. That's why you don't see that kind of violence in places like Cancun, like Tulum. They try to keep those places as safe as possible. Now, there are 2 sides of this story, though. If you're looking from the Mexican point of view, you could say, well, why are people coming here in the first place for medical procedures, right? So another kind of side of the story, while these nothing's proven as to why these people went over there. The Mexican president did mention some receipts that were found in the car. But this does also speak to the medical tourism side of things as well, doesn't it? Because a lot of people do go to Mexico, for prescription drugs, but also procedures as well that aren't necessarily safe or considered safe here.
That's exactly right. It's a variety of things. It can be getting drugs or procedures for cheaper. It can be getting those procedures that you can't get that are sometimes off the book treatments for certain conditions, cancer, the like, treatments that aren't authorized for use in the United States might be done down in Mexico. Some of the more edgy stuff that you can imagine, off-label drug prescriptions as well. And so there is a significant, you're right, medical trade and trade in all sorts of other goods that Americans can't get as easily here in the United States. And so we see a lot of that happening. And then, of course, there are the border flows that we know about that have raised so many concerns in the United States, both from all of Latin America coming up through Mexico to the southern border, but also, the flow of guns and weapons and drugs across that border as well.
So much to look at a story like this. Of course, we don't know many details just yet, but we will keep you guys updated as we learn more. Jamil Jaffer, thanks for coming on and shedding some light on this. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Nick.